What I'm going to do right now, though, is give you a little background. Many of you probably already know me. I've worked on a number of different books. Some of them are available here at the store. And I've also been involved in a lot of other areas in music and blacksmithing and some fun other areas as well. But what I want to do to start off is with one thing. It's kind of a lead-in. And this is a little bit of marketing, but it kind of talks about a study that was done by Forrester Wave on where cloud providers fit. And one of the things that that I have talked about a little earlier is on hybrid multi-cloud. What we're talking about now on building a cloud for systems of record are those mission-critical applications that have high governance, high security, and a lot of other compliance aspects to that. So what is a system of record? Well, one of the ways of doing this is telling a story. I've got a story up here. I'll give you another story in addition to that on some of the things that I've run into for systems of record. One of the challenges that some customers will face is they have a need to have mission critical applications running in a particular environment. In the cloud environment, it tends to have more challenges to it because of the nature of the access, the security aspects. So let's say that you are a customer or an enterprise that has these tools. SAP is one that my company is known for being a big supporter of for mission critical, but there are other ones. Enterprise, email, messaging systems, databases, things like Oracle, other ERP systems, healthcare systems, government cloud systems. Well, let's say we are in a commercial entity and all of a sudden we have downtime. What happens? Well, we could lose millions of dollars. We could lose millions of euros. How do we come up with a solution where we can minimize that downtime, minimize performance issues that impact your ability to actually do business? So when we look at mission critical applications and systems of record, there are two aspects. The mission critical application has what's called a systems of record where all the data is stored. This is the data that needs to be protected. If you lose the application and you rebuild the application, you still have access to the data, but you can't do the same thing on saying we'll just do a recovery of the data when you're dealing with mission critical applications. So we look at systems of record as being the authoritative source, and this is where the regulatory compliance guidelines come in, and that's where we get that high governance. So cloud for mission critical, can you build this? Can you build this yourself? Maybe. But one of the things that you can take advantage of is using a cloud provider that focuses on mission critical in support of doing the environment that will support the operations, the technical aspects, so that you don't have to worry about that as much. One of the things that we try to do is leverage the skills that we get from working with many different enterprises in supporting their mission critical workloads. And then the other question is, when you work with a service provider versus doing it on premises, there's a concept of CapEx and OpEx. Would it be better to partner with a service provider to give you the ability to reduce your costs and also your operational and CapEx spending? So I've got 5 items here that I wanted to call out of key characteristics for mission critical. Security, I always put as number 1, security first, that ties into governance. Availability, performance, high data affinity, location of the data to the location of the mission critical application, and regulatory compliance. When we look at engineering for mission critical, where we're going to build a cloud, we need something that can be scalable based on the needs of a particular business. And in many cases, when you're dealing with mission critical financial systems, mission critical e-commerce systems, you need to have the ability to scale on demand. End of quarter, special sales, holiday timeframes, maybe if you think about some of the commercial entities. We need to also be able to have an agility where the needs of the business as they change can be adapted for and supported by that architecture. We need to think about a standardized set of technologies, workflow processes, and so on to ensure that we have consistency so that if there is regulatory compliance audits, we have the ability to go through exactly the steps that we are taking in support of those applications, everything from doing a build out to the operational aspects. I have security, as I mentioned before, as being a very top element, and then there's also the availability. One of the things that we focused on early on at Virtustream was 5 nines of availability for our compute platform, We also focus on availability for the storage and the other components as well. But these are things that you should look at when you're comparing different service providers for mission critical. Now, the challenges that are faced by, for systems of record include things around what I've actually called out here. There's cost efficiency, there's security, there's connectivity. Each one of these decision areas, as I've talked about in the VCDX sessions that I've done in the past, can have an impact on other areas of this design. So if you're focused on finding the best solution around networking, are you taking into consideration security? Normally you are, but are you also taking into consideration how that could impact compute? How could that impact the storage area? I/O queue depths, CPU queue depths, these are all things that can actually tie in. And as you've heard me talk about in the VCDX program, it's really important to understand how each element of your design impacts other areas of the design and get a true understanding of that. Now, one of the things that we've looked at, and this is a study that was actually done by Forrester on looking at what are the pressures that you have on executing and making sure that you can meet the needs of the business and those mission critical apps. I call out some of the percentages here. I'm not going to run through these. You guys can take a look at them. But some of the top items are the performance aspects, the security aspects, and the rewriting of applications. You don't have to rewrite a traditional workload to run in the cloud, but there may be specific benefits of doing that. This is why it's also important to look at a cloud provider that can support both. This is the bimodal model, where you have both the traditional workloads, maybe monolithic, as well as the cloud native workloads that might be based on microservices. So requirements, constraints, and assumptions. I've listed out a few requirements here. There's basically the same requirements as you would have for mission critical applications. We look at high availability, high performance, hardened security, the ability to go through and provide full audit trails when you go through a regulatory compliance audit, looking at data affinity for performance reasons as well, and other types of enterprise class requirements. Constraints. Typically, performance, manageability, and governance. These are ones that you cannot change, especially if you're under guidelines such as PCI or FERPA or other regulatory compliance based on your region of the world. Every country is different, every region is different. EU has a new set of regulations or guidelines for regulations that are coming out next year. These are things that we're looking at as well. Some of the assumptions. Do you have a full inventory of the workloads, the ones that you consider mission critical and the other ones that may depend upon, DNS servers and other servers like that? And how do you classify those workloads? Are they I/O intensive? Are they compute intensive? What are the governance guidelines? And what are some of the technical and operational skills that your team has? Do you want to do it all yourself? Do you want to have the cloud provider do all of this? Or do you want to find a partnership where there's an on-premises solution and an off-premises solution that works together, where you can take advantage of the cloud provider to manage the mission critical services that are on top of that cloud environment? So from architectural solutions, we look at how do you characterize or show the characteristics for this solution? Well, you would look at proven technologies. Bleeding edge technologies are fun to work with, but they may not be the ones that you want to place your mission critical applications on. Proven processes. How do you go through this process for consistency to ensure you continue to meet those guidelines? What are the operational team's skill sets? Do they understand what it means to be mission critical in the context of your business, as well as far as compliance goes? And then how do you deal with managed services? One of the things that we looked at when our company was looking at mission critical clouds and systems of record is that managed services is critical. We focus on managed services up to the database layer from the application side and up to the container level on the cloud native workload side. So for the platform of tomorrow, this is one of the things that we've looked at. We have been built on top of VMware technologies for a very long time, going back to about 2009, 2010 timeframe. Now, there is something called VMware Cloud Foundation. We've partnered with VMware specifically to work with supporting a hybrid cloud solution where we have the vRealize suite supporting an interface to our cloud connector that I'll talk to you in a second. And that is the on-premise side. And then for the off-premise, it could be Virtustream, it could be a VMware type of cloud, it could be another type of cloud, a Microsoft Azure cloud, for example. So with the enterprise class cloud, we're looking at characteristics of high availability, performance, hardened security that I mentioned before for this on-premise private cloud. And then the application types could be applications of record, the technologies that are actually running the software, systems of insight, some of the analytics, and then systems of engagement, the interfaces that you deal with. When we look at, there's 2 slides here, I'm going to bounce back and forth. The first one talks about the technologies that we use within our solution for a hybrid cloud. Virtustreams, Xstream, micro-VM concepts, VMware vSphere, NSX, and vSAN. And then the types of workloads that you could find in there are things like SAP, Oracle, Hadoop, other Microsoft applications, Pivotal Cloud Foundry for a developer cloud. These are things that are important to think about when you work with a cloud provider. Now, what are some of the differentiators? There's a micro-VM concept that we have that provides the ability to bill in a more accurate way based on the resources that you use. Typically, when you go with a cloud provider, you're paying for the infrastructure that you need, but not what you actually use. We focus on what you use instead, which gives you a better price performance model, especially when you factor in the managed services aspects. For apps that aren't migrated to the cloud, we want to find a way that you can support those in a cloud environment without having to do major changes, so that you can get started while you're doing still development, maybe converting it to a cloud native workload. We also want to make sure, to that point, is that when you do that lift and shift, when you move from your on-prem to off-prem or back, or if you move from one cloud provider to another, how can you support that without having to change the code each time? The other thing is looking at greater network bandwidth for migration of things like SAP workloads. There can be very large amounts of data. We typically will look at MPLS or a VPN connection over a high-speed connection to actually support that. We look at managed services as being a key aspect of supporting your application as a partnership with your IT team and your application team. And then we have security and compliance built in. So we don't just stop at the infrastructure, we sell a full solution that goes all the way through to that end layer. So I wanted to close with just a couple more slides. One is on specialization examples that I mentioned before. We have an enterprise cloud, we have a storage cloud that we support with high levels of SLAs. We also have a healthcare cloud, we have a federal cloud that we're working on. We have Pivotal Cloud Foundry service, which is a way that you can develop applications, and similar to how Pivotal Cloud Foundry works on-prem, we can support it off-prem and provide that connection there. And we also offer a big data service at the very tail end. So once again, I'll close with this one slide on where we're looking at the analysts of the Forrester Wave research that was done on where we fit in for those mission-critical enterprise cloud workloads. We want to continue to do that. We want to continue to work with the customers and learn more about what your needs are and actually supporting you on that. So for next steps, I would recommend looking at evaluating your business needs and looking at classes of applications, something that I talked in one of my earlier sessions. You need to understand those workloads and what your needs are and what the compliance guidelines are to actually move forward and actually get started in having the correct discussions with the service provider.